Welcome to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast, where insights, attitudes, and methods for success get illuminated. Learn what leaders and change workers have done and are doing now to create magnificent futures. We interview great guests who inspire you to overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Be sure you visit our website at self-helpcoaching.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, just relax as you listen. You can do something else, but be ready to make an important note. And let's get started.
The title of this interview is Unleashing the Story Within. And the new thing we'll be talking about is the journey into the supernatural. Now, it's not the first time we got into this, but we've only alluded to it, really. Now we're going to go into some depth. So let me tell you about my guest. Her name is Victoria Andersen, and she is a published author of 3 paranormal memoir books, and they are Touched, Trial by Fire, and Mastering the Paradox, available on Amazon as VP Andersen, not Victoria Andersen, but VP Andersen. And it is a nonfiction, it's a nonfiction book, Leap Into Your Story, 30-day writer's journal, online course creator situation. So if that resonates with you, pay attention. So let me tell you about Leap Into Your Story. Leap Into Your Story, writing with these 15 easy steps to start writing your book is that your new program, Victoria?
It is. It's actually my online course.
Fantastic.
So, yes.
Online courses are where it's at. So a little bit more about Victoria before I unleash her. She is also an international motivational speaker and creator of the Leap Into Your Story podcast. We both do the same sort of branding. My podcast is Self-Help Coaching Podcast. I've created Proficio, which is the world's first true self-help coach. And obviously, her book is Leap Into Your Story. Her program is Leap Into Your Story. Her podcast is Leap Into Your Story. And we're going to leap into the Victoria Andersen story in a moment. So a little bit more background. She lives in central New Mexico with her husband, cats. By the way, I'm a cat lover too. I have 5 cats, all rescues. I also take care of ferals outside my back window of a feeding station, a cat ramp, a cat condo. I love all animals, actually. I find myself currently being a cat guy. So I love that. But she's in New Mexico, so she's got also wildlife that roam her backyard. We don't have that in Brooklyn. We got raccoons. We got some crazy homeless people occasionally, but no New Mexico wildlife. And I lived in Arizona, so I know how wonderful it is out there. And she's near the Rio Grande River. I only hope that any illegal activity you're safe from over there, because I know it's pretty crazy out there right now. So, but when she isn't writing, she's working in her ceramic studio, gardening, or hiking ancient Native American petroglyphs near her home. What are petroglyphs precisely, Victoria?
Those are ancient pictorials that are carved into the rock.
Right.
And they can be very mysterious to very mundane, a hunting scene or strange, spirals or doorways. So I've always been fascinated by those. So yes, I hike them when I can. What's not to be
fascinated by? I mean, the people who were here before us, especially the people who are, in this modern era that we live in, obviously every day is more modern than the day before, but we've gotten away from so many things. We're so, I mean, there's always a veil between our eyes and reality.
Yes.
But I think the veil has really thickened by the nature of our society today. There's a million different forces trying to paint the picture, trying to paint the narrative, and it's so convoluted, so distorting. It's very hard to have even a glimpse of the truth.
I agree 150,000%.
Wow. I maxed out. That's a total max out. Very good. Now I'm really looking forward to this interview because one, you're an expert on writing books. Obviously, she got 3. She got a 4th coming out. She has a program online, but she also delves into her main area is, as I've said, the supernatural. And I know, and I love the supernatural, but I need some convincing. I'm not gullible to it. I mean, how could you dispute it just because you can't see it? But that doesn't mean it's not there. Right? We're only limited to our perception.
Exactly. And also, too, I don't know if you realize that our ability to see certain lights and hear frequencies are very limited.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
being as an animal lover yourself,
Mm.
you can appreciate the fact that, a dog can hear a dog whistle, but we can't.
Right, of course.
A cat might be able to
Per-
see
perfect
150
example.
yards away with those big bulgy eyes that we can't. They can see, bats can see in the dark.
Right.
So
there are organic differences which completely change our perception. But
correct.
and as you and I have already really vehemently agreed on, is that the societal influence on our mind, right? And as we create our beliefs from day one, are really the biggest factor on what we see and what we think.
Exactly. And there's always some sort of narrative that's trying to keep us there.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I realized as a writer is you get to pull back the layers of deception, especially when it's a memoir writing. And I've had the privilege and opportunity to speak with many, many high-level, successful, and even billionaires. And they will testify that they will attribute their success to beyond the normal means.
Wow. Yeah. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm striving to be one of those guys, now, as I told you earlier, I've created an app, Proficio, which is going to transform self-help, personal development. And so now I went from being a life coach to the head of a technological coaching company. So now all my icons are tech stop billionaires, tech startup billionaires. All right. And I have no money goals. All my goals are non-money. But I really believe and hope now that the money follows, and I have no doubt that it will. But what I focus on every day, well, I do this a little bit too much, is the thing that I'm building that's coming, right? It's not here now, right? As a matter of fact, if I talk to the wrong person or spoke too much about it, people would say, get a grip on reality, Tony. You're still struggling. You haven't even launched yet. And I would say, that's true. All right. But let me tell you something. Elon Musk, there was a day when he didn't have 2 cents in his pocket. All right. How rich is he now?
Exactly. I mean, who ever thought the internet was here to stay?
that fad is still here.
Oh my gosh. TV was like, that's a fad. Nobody's going to watch it. Who would ever thought that your cell phone has more capability than anything that's landed on the moon
You're
or
addicted to
sent to
this.
outer space?
I walk around with this. I go to sleep with this. I get up out of the bed and I reach over to my nightstand and I pick this up and walk out of my bedroom. And I rail against these addictions and these, the social media nonsense, which I'm addicted to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. I rail against it, but I'm still its slave.
Yeah, we all are. And who would have ever thought that? I will tell you, and I actually have a section in my first book, Touched, where I'm a very complicated person who likes things simple.
Yeah.
But when I heard about a cell phone that you can carry in your purse without, because my brother had one in his car and you had to carry like the big old brick, that I wasn't having that.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, if you're going to go high tech, I mean, I remember spending like $400 on a Motorola flip phone. That, my hand could barely come around it, but hey, I didn't have the brick and I can make a phone call anywhere at any time of the day. And so when the smartphones were coming out, they're talking about, oh, you can do this. You can smartphone your house and you can control the thermostat. And I'm like, I just want to make a damn phone call. Where is the phone function?
It's so funny, anyone who's not living in nature,
Yeah.
in the wilderness or nature, we're living in the world that people have created, right? The people who are dead, and people who are alive, but who are standing on who stood on the shoulders of those who preceded them. This entire world that we live in, our societal world, is man-made, and it's all came from people's minds, and then it came through their fingertips and into reality, and we're in it, and we think it's reality. No, it was a reality that has been created. Right. And we're living it, and we think it's as real as hell.
I know. And I mean, at some point, everybody who had a great invention was mocked because they couldn't see beyond the immediate timeline.
Absolutely. Right now, as I said earlier, I'm undercapitalized. That's why we haven't launched my app yet. And I'm seeking to capitalize right now. And it's a hard time, especially because I don't want to give away equity in my company. Why would I do that unless it's necessary? I think my company is going to be a multi-billion-dollar company. Why should you give me X amount and I'm not doing it.
No Shark Tank. Am I hearing no Shark Tank?
No, I'm not giving away equity unless I have to, but I have considered it. If I get to that point, that's on the table for me.
Yeah, you got to leave all options open. Yeah.
But I really believe, like any good entrepreneur, that I'm going to be successful. But the more I worked on Proficio, the more zeros I saw in it, the more potential I saw in it, the more applicability, the more zeros. And when I'm a big success, however you want to picture that, all those that I think that I've asked for money, which are many people, and didn't give me anything, I think they're going to have a different feeling than they have now.
Yeah.
Thinking, why wasn't I a little bit more open-minded, a little bit more trusting, a little bit more risk-taking, a little bit more willing to buy into someone's vision just for the sake of progress? I think that they'll have those thoughts. We'll see. I could maybe, or if I fail utterly, they'll be able to, dance on my grave.
Well, just remember, failure. I heard this from a entrepreneur that says there's either successing at your business or learning at your business. There's no failures, because even Edison took 1,000 tries on the light bulb, right? He learned 1,000 ways how not to create. It was
actually, I think it was more like 2,500 actually.
Something, yes.
And could you imagine he quit? I mean, hypothetically, well, we'd still be living with gas lights. Okay, that's what they had, gas lights.
That's right.
Right, and he didn't do the bulb.
Right.
He did electricity. All right.
And I don't know if the story's true, because one of the things that I'm a big advocate is really embracing your why. And that's what keeps you going in your story, in your business. Because if what I read about Edison is that his mother had surgery and they didn't have enough light. So he, back in the day, they put a mirror behind the candle. And I don't know if it was something tragic that because they didn't have enough light, she needed emergency surgery. And that was, from my understanding, like I says, I haven't checked how true that story is, but it seems pretty practical, or it seems probable.
It seems plausible, for sure.
Yeah, he had a personal
motivation.
Yes, that was his why that kept him going through that 2,500.
That's me big time. Proficio is going to transform self-help. It's going to create a success revolution. Why do because I just want to do it as an entrepreneur? No, it's because I love self-help, but it's really the potential that keeps us, dangling on a hook like a fish, right?
Exactly.
But it doesn't really, as I said to you earlier, if self-help worked, I would have been a millionaire a long time ago. The thing is, why I want to transform self-help is because I've been such a miserable failure at it. But I've isolated the problems. I've solved the problems with a tech guy, because I don't know tech at all. I'm a coach. I'm an NLP practitioner, and we were able to do it. And it's very complex, because something like this, which is going to be transformative, and it's going to work for the entire world, because the universal experience, everyone has a subjective experience, of course, but there's also a universal experience as well. And we all have the same, people, there's all sorts of, obviously, theological beliefs, spiritual beliefs, but the truth is that we all share the same consciousness. And what is that? That means I wake up in the morning, I open my eyes, I have a thought, and I do something. That continues during the day until I fall asleep and dream. And that is the same for every single person. Right. All right. Whatever the subjective thing is, whatever the individual thing is, great. But that's the experience of consciousness. And we all have that, every single one.
Yes. Yes. And that's important, because it goes back to, I'm actually going to be discussing the recording of things in your conscious stream. Part of what's deemed as psychic ability is really just different levels of brainwaves. So I'm very big in meditation, and through my practice of that, I realize that everybody has the ability to tap into it. Some people are just better at it. And part of what I'm now moving my coaching and podcast direction is not so much building a physical story, but understanding the journey of it. So, and that's big. I spent at least a third of coaching and coursing and preaching on my podcast about mindset and understanding yourself. You are the greatest discovery of, it's not outside of you. It's all inside of you. You just have to, much like, the excavation process, and writing, especially with memoirs, is a great expedition. And to understand that there is a diamond inside.
I absolutely, it totally makes sense. And, what you said just totally also about psychic ability. While I'm not psychic, or at least I don't know that I am, that always seemed to me to be the truth, that people have different abilities or different inclinations. And, just like some people are great athletes and most people are not. Some people can use their minds in ways that most people cannot. And I think there's innate ability, but there's also, like anything, the more you work on something, the better you get at it.
Yes.
Victoria, let's take
a better understanding. There's Absolutely. A better understanding. And a lot of people don't realize how intuitive or psychic they are. They're just like, oh, I just got this thought and I put it to work, and man, it just worked and everything's just flowing. That's part of it. It's not about the future, because the future is malleable, and it's determined by your decisions now.
Absolutely.
So if you continue down a path, you'll have one future.
Absolutely.
If you make changes, you'll have a different future. And I didn't really understand that until probably the last year, because I'm very big. I won't practice it unless I won't preach it, I should say, unless I practice it and have enough successful results. So I'm convinced that the future is malleable.
How dare you have such integrity? And I love it. That's my little joke. And I love what you talked about mindset. And that's the icing on the cake. That's the platinum, because mindset is where it's at. I mean, it's not the only thing, but boy, it makes the difference. Let's take a moment to hear from our sponsor. I'm going to come right back with Victoria Andersen.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Perficio. People start something, then something comes up, or they need a break or even a vacation, and they often never get back on track. Perficio is designed to allow all of this. Visit www.perficio.io. That's PERFICIO.io, where you can live your life as you learn and make progress toward your life-changing goals.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza. We're having a fantastic conversation with Victoria Andersen about writing, about the supernatural, and I want to get into the meat, some of the value that she offers people. And my first question, Victoria, is there are lots of writing programs and coaches out there. So what's different with your strategy and courses?
Well, I really dive into the mindset. Now, my target market, and it's not exclusively for them, are beginners and beginner writers who've always said, I feel like I want to tell my story, whether, it's their own personal memoir or fiction or nonfiction, but I just don't know what to do. And usually that's just a cover story to all the fears.
Yes.
So it's the fear because, the whole writing industry is entirely different than when I got into it 20 some years ago. You have self-publishing options. You have now AI programs that can create an outline. You have spell check, you have Grammarly programs, you have software that can edit for you. And then of course there's options such as like Upwork and Fiverr, where you can, for a fraction of the cost, have somebody look at your manuscript and, if you wanted to do it the old-fashioned way. So there's really no excuse. There's no excuse to say, I don't know how to start. I don't know how to create an outline. I don't know how to, I feel I don't spell well. I don't have good grammar. There's no more excuses these days.
Obviously I talked about self-help, the self-help, personal development. I contend most people are not into self-help because they fear failure. Now, there could be a number of other reasons, or there are other reasons, but that is the primary reason. Why should I read a book or do a course if I know I'm going to fail, if I fear failing? If that's going to happen, it's a big waste of time. Plus, I'll feel like crap and I'll be embarrassed and people will poke fun at me that I said I was going to do great and I did shit, Yeah. And then there's the next step is, of course, is coaching.
Right.
Which is a growing field always, every year increasing. But less people are into coaching, even though it's a growing field, because they fear even worse failing in front of somebody that they're paying. They fear you out even more, right? So fear, and there's other factors certainly, but I was a life coach, and I know psychology. I'm not a degreed psychologist, but I'm a practical psychologist, and how I apply psychology. It's the most fascinating subject to me, psychology. Why do we do what we do? Why do we not do what we don't do? It's the two most fascinating questions that I could think of. Right.
Well, it's the pleasure pain paradigm.
There you go. And fear is more often than not at
right.
the core of it. I'm afraid. I'll never admit that I'm afraid, because then that's too vulnerable. Then I would lose face. I would be less of a man, less of a woman. I'd be less than perfect. This mask of infallibility, of well-balancedness will be shown to have a crack in it. All this stuff. The truth is that we're all messes. I don't say that with any condemnation.
Yeah, it's true.
Right?
It's true.
Right. We're all one big giant process. That's what we are. That's the human life, is a process. You were born. The day of death is rapidly coming. I don't say that with any macabre, none of that. It's rapidly coming for every one of us. And the time in between is a process, and we call it life. That's it.
And it's important to make the most of it.
Absolutely.
I think one of the biggest challenges is the fear, like you had mentioned. And that's why a good part of my courses are talking about the fears, the 5 fears. And, part of that is the ridicule, the failure, getting started. That's the biggest one. It's the first steps of trying to move the progress. But my course, believe it or not, is under 2 hours. And what I do is I try to
Wow.
yeah, like I says, I mean, it's not going to be the most detailed because you don't want to fire hose somebody with information. So
Yeah, one of the greatest self-help books I've ever read, and I love self-help as much as I may condemn it. I don't condemn it, I criticize it, but it's awesome. Is the Four Agreements, which is probably one of the simplest self-help books out there. It goes into the Four Agreements, right? By Don Miguel Ruiz.
yes,
And
Don
this is
Miguel.
one of the best self-help books there are. It's short. It only espouses 4 principles, as the title describes. Yes, one of the best. So when you talk about your course being only 2 hours and just being rather simple, that is not a criticism. That's not a disparagement. That is to its merit. Actually,
Yes.
that's more apt to increase its success for the user as well as to you as the creator.
Right. And I mean, for a beginner, you want to just give them a sampling and let them explore. So the majority of my course is going to be all the mindset, talking about the meditation, the NLP, which is you need to have a mantra. You got to reprogram all the garbage and, simply just stay intact with your why. And that really kind of sets the course. And then I go into a little bit about the book structuring and a little bit about the marketing. But really, the bulk of it is trying to move past the fears, staying in touch with your why. You have a little bit of story structure, whether you do fiction, nonfiction, or memoir, and a little bit of dabble of explanation, say, of, if you want to do the publisher versus self-publishing, and to get you started on the marketing. I'm a big advocate of self-publishing.
I love
I
it.
worked with a publisher. I'm not going that route ever again. I'm a control freak, number one. And frankly, I don't like people telling me what to do, especially if my inner compass is directing me there. I mean, I've gone against professional advice, experts in the field, and the inner compass in me has never let me go wrong.
Let me tell you, we are in the same tribe, Victoria. We are in the same tribe. I'm a controversial person, and I don't do that just for its own sake. That's stupid. Is to go by my compass. That's what's critically important to me, by my compass.
Yes.
That's not to say I'm not open to feedback or shoot.
Exactly.
That's not just stupid. That's idiotic.
Yes.
And that I shouldn't consider other people's views. I absolutely should, but that doesn't mean that should be my new decision.
Yeah. Well, I like immediate connection. And that, I mean, if you were to deal with a publisher, you're looking at, before pandemic, minimum probably 2 years from the time they accept your book to getting it to print.
Wow.
For me, my manuscript's polished. I can upload to Amazon in 72 hours. I got a finished product.
So someone can hypothetically conceive of a book, write it in X amount of time,
yes,
right? Maybe a week. Okay, possibly.
yes,
And then 3 days later, you're a published author.
exactly.
I love it, man. It's great. And I love what you're about. I mean, on a multifaceted way. And I've had other publishing coaches and experts on here, and the service and value that you guys provide, I think is critical, and you guys are going to become huge, because everybody's got a book in them, and the vast majority of us just don't write it because of I think you've already alluded and went into it to some degree, but what do you think is the main reason most people who want to write don't? And we talked about fears, but do you want to, is that it?
You know what? I'll have to say the number one fear is just getting started, because we're back to our earlier conversation about all this distraction. It steals your ability to keep your initial step in, going, because you got to check emails, you got to check your phone, you're on
So
social
it seems
media.
to me, that the fear that you've just described is the fear of starting something that's
Yes,
not worth it. And if we
right.
thought something was worth it,
Or unknown. It's the fear of the unknown. I know what my feelings are going to be when I log into social media, right? I'm either going to be upset or happy.
right.
But when you start a book, that's the fear of the unknown.
You see, you've got to know your own resources. When you know your own resources, then what's known is greater and what's unknown is lesser. And that fear of the unknown is I'm a sailor and a scuba diver, and I love being out there on the water and under the water. But what I don't see out there scares the shit out of me.
There you go.
And all that is the fear of the unknown. I don't know what it
Yes.
is. And as deep as I get into it as a diver, or I don't know, I'm scared.
Right.
But the more I do it, the less scared I become. And it's the same
That's right.
thing in life. Okay, if I think I'm going to write a book, but it's unknown, will I be a success or a failure? But if I know my own resources, all right, and if I know that I can tap into my resources, and including tapping in the inner resource of tapping into external resources to get me towards my goal, then what's known is much more is known, and the fear,
Right.
there's much less to fear because much less is unknown.
Exactly. And that's something that I'm an advocate of. You'll hear me on my podcast or in my coaching or in the courses, is I don't advocate time blocks. What I do is say, spend 2 minutes to meditate, 2 minutes to write, and do it every day, because that breaks down the unknown. If you break it down in manageable, known, it becomes part of like brushing your teeth every day.
Right.
You move it from the unknown to the known.
Right. And
And
in NLP, we call that chunking down. That's the most basic way that we help people get over procrastination. There are many ways, but that is the most basic and universal way, is that people think of things as too big. So just break them down to smaller bite-sized sizes, if you will. It's just smaller things. Oh, it's too much to brush my teeth. Well, can you move the toothbrush across your teeth one time?
There you go.
All right. Well, one time, can you do that? Okay, great stuff. Let's take another moment to hear from our sponsor. I'm going to come back with this great, organic, and valuable, I think, conversation with Victoria Andersen. I'm loving this, Victoria.
Me too.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Proficio. How's your financial health? Are you ready for emergencies? What if you actually had in you the wisdom of Benjamin Franklin? There's a reason why his face is on the $100 bill. Visit www.proficio.io. That's PERFICIO.io, where you can make certain that you're on the road to be financially independent no matter what happens.
Listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza. The conversation I'm having with Victoria Andersen is just, I think, so valuable to anyone that even had the notion at any point in time in writing a book. And not just because of that per se, but what she's talking about is making it so much more accessible, easy. Just use the word easy for a person. There are all sorts of programs and coaching, and I'm not downgrading any of them, but she's articulating the simplicity of her programs and how easy it is to get started and to be successful. So this, I think, is an extremely valuable conversation for any listener. Obviously, to talk more about Victoria afterwards, or get involved with the programs, it seems to me that would be very worth it. But let me get into my next question now, Victoria. All right, we touched on it a bit, but now I want some more depth. Can you tell us what are the 3 starting steps to writing?
Well, of course, just kind of getting in the habit of finding your center. So that's, again, taking that 2 minutes, whether you want to try to meditate to hit maybe an alpha state, or just decompressing
So
from
calming down,
calming
getting
down.
into a creative state.
Right. Or at least a state where you can hear your own thoughts. You know, we don't hear our own thoughts unless they're negative and screaming at us. But I think it's important, just the power of just silence. It may take some time to get there, but it doesn't have to even be a whole lot. We're talking 1 to 2 minutes. That's what I coach to. Get into the quiet space. And again, that's going to set the stage for ideas, impulses to kind of come through. And then what I recommend, I'm a big advocate of journaling, because all my books all started from journaling. Journaling is going to do that chunking down that we talked a little bit about, but also, you know, you're going to have a little bit of self-discovery. One of the biggest wins that I realized, especially if you think you're such a failure and, you know, you don't have a high perception of you. If you journal every day and just put down, like, those are your private thoughts. But if you go back, even like a couple of weeks, you might actually be impressed with yourself.
You know, I've sporadically, Victoria, I've sporadically journaled over many years, and a few times people, you know, I would use an audio recorder.
Whatever.
Well, you know, that I'm more apt to do that because it's easier. But anyway, whether I'm writing or talking, a few times people have asked me, "What are you doing?" And I would tell journaling, and they would either say something snarky or they would say something, you know, deriding, or they would ask, "Well, why are you doing that?" I said, I would typically say, because I'm important enough to do that. That's right. And the reaction was often like, "What? How dare you think of yourself as important?" So what I would say to people is, if you don't think that that journaling is worth doing, get to what's beneath that idea. Yeah. What's beneath that idea that journaling about yourself is not worth doing? And I contend, just as I just alluded to, it's because you don't value yourself enough. And, you know, you talk about memoirs, that's an expertise and a focus of yours. And half the books that I want to write are memoir, right? Even ones that take a fictional bent, you know, they're based on truth. That's the thing I know best, is my own experience. You know, that's the thing I can say with unequivocal truth is true. My own experience. That doesn't mean I was right in my perceptions and presumptions. No, but I can tell you my experience was absolutely true on how I experienced it. And so I'm the world's foremost expert on my own experience.
That's exactly right. And one of the other big, I guess, takeaways from the journaling and the memoir journey is that, you know, people who really, I felt, hurt me, betrayed me, just tried to screw me, they actually kind of at some point became my best teachers, because what they taught me wasn't that they were bad people. I mean, there would no doubt be a collective opinion that those people were terrible and whoever dealt with them. But what they really exposed was areas that I needed to examine, to toughen up, to change belief systems about the world and myself in order to prevent that from happening. So, I've never been a big advocate of the victim mentality, but at some point, you have to understand that you're putting out a vibe for these people to target you. And that's where I go into the paranormal and specifically metaphysics.
Elaborate.
Yes, so and there's quantum in that. There's the quantum abundance, the quantum healing, and the quantum protection. And that's really not about any type of I don't know what I want to say, mystical thing. That's just sort of more about self-awareness and understanding that how you perceive yourself in the world, that's how the world's going to treat you. And that's one of the things why I'm a big advocate of meditation, is because, our actions aren't from our conscious mind. They're from our unconscious and what's been programmed. The unconscious takes in everything, but it's the conscious mind that puts a positive or negative spin into it. So with the meditation, you start realizing that maybe your thought patterns become corrupted as you get quiet with yourself. And when I learned this about, I was tired of feeling like I had this target on my back. Like every person that came into my life seemed to take advantage of me. And when I started going, hey, look who's the common denominator in all them, right?
There you go.
I'm the common denominator in all these people. It was like the same bad story playing out with me as the character in that same story.
The star victim.
Yeah, so that's where I had to shift from, the poor me, this isn't working, and I don't know. I mean, there isn't enough of sage and salt and crystals. It's not external, people. It's not. It's internal. And really, when I started to unfold and excavate that, I really felt like, I was a victim in this mean world. And the world is not kind, but it's all about how you decide what you're going to fortify. And, part of the journaling, the memoir process is really it's been a self-discovery of, I'm the main common denominator. I have to figure this out. That's when I started to get serious about the meditation and self-hypnosis. And really, when this all came to fruition for me, I'm like, I have to share it. So I went from just being like an author to, I need to coach people on this, because there's a lot of people that don't understand it. And I'll be honest, it's a little hard to explain sometimes, but it's all about how you see yourself operating in this world.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. The self-image
Yes.
is critical. I mean, that started with Maxwell. Well, not even starting with Maxwell Maltz and psycho-cybernetics in the early 60s or the 50s. And continues to this day, because it's true. We think that what we see out in the world is what we believe. No, what we believe on the inside is what we see on the outside.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That's
And I
what
mean,
we see.
yeah. And one of the things that also that these folks taught me is that they had a very high perception of themselves, even though they were pretty terrible. But they seemed to almost dodge the bullets. But I will tell you this: if what you see does come back with interest, and at some point, you ever see like the movie series, these Final Destination?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Where somebody eludes death and then it kind of goes to the next person and it kind of keeps going. I've seen energy come back into those people, like the Final Destination. So even though they are helpful in your journey and they seem to be bulletproof at some point, the buck will stop with the karmic energy that they've seeded and come right back to them. So
I love it. Let's take our last break, and it'll be followed with unfortunately the last segment with Victoria Andersen, but we'll come right back after this.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Perphysio. What if there was a self-improvement program truly personalized to you, that knew and cared for you deeply, that whatever was going on in your life adapted for you perpetually? Visit www.perphysio.io. That's PERFICIO.io, where you can start a program that will always suit you, considering all the pressures and nuances of your life.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza. The conversation with Victoria Andersen that we're having is I think it's very entertaining, quite frankly, even though I'm a little biased and titillating, but I think it's very, very valuable for anyone that obviously wants to write a book, but someone that has either ideas that aren't conventional, or they have some problem being with conformity. They're like, okay, I don't like this conformity, but I'm missing something to challenge it. I think that the stuff that you're talking about is a bullseye to those people. So if that resonates with you, listener, this is the last segment with Victoria, but you're going to want to go to our website. So this is okay. Now we've touched on it a bit. There are a lot of misconceptions about writing a book. All right. And what are those, and how do you approach them?
Well, the misconceptions are generally those fears that we talked about, right? I'm not good enough. I don't know, I'm terrible at writing, or I get bad grammar. And so
I think now allow me, Victoria, and you let me know how accurate this is that a person may think that they need a certain amount of education or to be proficient in the language enough to have permission to write, or they may even feel that they need permission from someone or something to write.
Yes, that I would say that's it right there. Sometimes they feel like they need to have that validated. Like, you think I'm good enough to write a book?
Yeah.
You think my stories, who would want to hear my story? I'm not a celebrity, especially with memoirs. And I'll be honest, with the publishing world, they generally kind of poo-poo memoir writing, unless you are some celebrity or political figure. But I will share when my editor approached me with this, and I'll share with your listeners that, there's two parts to memoir writing. One is you want to share your story, but then it goes back to, well, why do you want to share your story? And ultimately, the root cause that what's compelling their why is they're hoping that it will help people out there who've shared their same experience. So my expectation, when my editor had a conversation with me, and she says, what do you want to accomplish with your memoir? And it was just the first one at the time. It evolved to two more, and on the fourth one. And I says, I'm really not sure, that I'll be any big author. Not that was not my intention, but my goal was to hopefully share it and inspire, or, have some connection with somebody who maybe been in the same experience with me. And that has been accomplished many more times than I expected. So the whole purpose of your why, whether they understand that or not, is generally the whole purpose of sharing the story isn't just to share it. So for the purpose of sharing, it's to having the expectation that somebody can relate to it, even if it's one person, because you have to think the power of one. And that's something that I coach to. People don't live on an island. So even if you help one person, you sell one, you sell one book, okay? Somebody other than a family or friend buys your book. You sell one book. That one book means $1 million to that person.
Absolutely.
How do you feel about that?
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. You've just made a difference with
You made a
one
difference.
person.
Right.
One person.
Well, actually, not one person, because there's that one person, because you think about it, if that one person is transformed, everybody they come in contact now has a piece of that transformation pie.
Absolutely. I'm just saying that all it takes is the one, and you've been successful. You're
Exactly.
successful.
Yes.
You did it. You did it. Pat yourself on the back. You did it.
Exactly.
Great stuff. You have been a fantastic guest, Victoria. My final question is, okay, so you do the coaching, you write courses, you also have the podcast with the same brand. Describe the value of your podcast in one sentence, please.
Well, I mean, it is a writer's podcast with an exposure to all different sides of writing. Now it's going more into the metaphysic, paranormal, because you can't talk about life success without having that element in there. But I also have well-known fiction writers, screenwriters, nonfiction, fiction. I had a guest who the book was inspired by Enemies at the Gate.
The movie?
Yes, the movie. So check out, he has some really great tips on there. But also the next step is not only the exposure to trying to inspire you to leap into your story, but every one of these podcasts will share something about breaking down the process, how to discuss that into into the written form, so you can ultimately leap into your story.
Fantastic. And do you have any final remarks for the audience, Victoria?
You know, I'm hoping that everybody can move past the fear, put your toe in the water a little bit every day to chunk it down. Start with journaling, because it's important that, we have a limited time on this planet. And much like one of my authors said, why be so guarded? Take the risk. They mock you, they ridicule you, who cares? Because nobody can take away, like you mentioned, the process from you. And even if you don't get to the publishing finish line, the journey itself is going to be worthwhile because of what you will discover about yourself.
Fantastic. And I understand you also have a free gift for the listener.
I do. You can try out my writer's toolkit. It has 2 courses and a checklist to help focus. When you decide to take the leap into your story, you can grab the gift at leapintoyourstory.com/gifts and grab that free goodie.
So that's leapintoyourstory.com, or they can type in
They can type leapintoyourstory.com / though you'll be able to find it at leapintoyourstory.com. It's going to have the 2 online courses with the checklist.
Fantastic. I really listen. If you've ever thought about writing a book, just thought about it. I've had several people that are involved in writing on this podcast. This Victoria's themes is the most accessible one, and I'm not taking away anything from those other guests, but hers seems the simplest and easiest, and I really encourage you to do it, because there's not, the journey of 1,000 miles start with the very first step, and that's the hardest step to take. So just take that first step. And we're going to have a page set for you on our website, selfhelpcoaching.com, and you're all over social media. So we'll have all that set up for you, Victoria. You've been a wonderful guest. guest. I really appreciate it. Very illuminating, very entertaining, very valuable. Most of all, I think I've
Thank
so
you.
enjoyed.
It's been a pleasure.
Me too. Meeting you and discussing with you. Great stuff. I got the feeling that we'll be talking more. This is the beginning of our relationship. So
Yes.
thanks again very much for stopping by and speaking with us, Victoria. And remember, listener, we're all responsible for ourselves, and we could all use a little help. And with that, see you on the next episode of the Self-Help Coaching Podcast. Thanks again, Victoria.
You.
Thank you for tuning in to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast, where insights, attitudes, and methods for success get illuminated. Learn what leaders and change workers have done and are doing now to create magnificent futures. Remember to visit our website at self-helpcoaching.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Self-Help Coaching Podcast.